Hello again. We are Chris Lee and Chase Robinson of Southeastern 16 here to preview Sam Pittman and the Arkansas Razorbacks for the 2024 football season. We are doing this in mid-July in case something has changed. We're not idiots. We probably just haven't seen it happen yet. But in any case, Chase, Arkansas with an interesting season ahead. Sam Pittman and the Hogs disappointed a year ago, but a lot of injuries and other things involved in that. The Razorbacks have hit the portal hard and looking forward to an improved 2024 season. At least that's what the hope is in Fayetteville. Tough schedule. We talked about that in another video, but an interesting year for Sam Pittman and Arkansas.
Yeah, and I mean 4-8 last year is not what they were looking for, obviously, and what the fan base is looking for, and I think that's the thing this year is you were in so many close games last year. You had so many injuries last year. Like what's the improvement going to be in 2024? I think that's a big question for Arkansas heading into this year. Did you improve? Did you get the pieces in place to put a better product in the field? I think that's what we're going to have to wait and see as when the season rolls around, is what kind of changes were made in the offseason to capitalize on those close games, to add more depth. I think those are some things I'm looking for heading into the season.
Yeah, likewise. And before we get into that, a reminder, our content brought to you by BetOnline, your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. From baseball, golf, soccer, right down to the top fights in UFC and MMA, as well as boxing, every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game is over, head on to our online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today, get in on all the action, use promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet online, the game starts here. Well, let's start with the offense, Chase. And Arkansas does not have KJ Jefferson for the first time in a while. It does have Taylen Green, the big quarterback transfer from Boise State, checking in at around 6'6" and 225. Threw for 1,752 yards last year, ran for 436, and probably more importantly, almost 6 yards per carry and 9 scores. What are the Hogs getting in Taylen Green?
I think they're getting a good quarterback, and I think he fits really well with Bobby Petrino, as he'll be leading the offense for the Arkansas Razorbacks, as that move happened in the offseason. So you get an offensive coordinator who works really well with a quarterback like Taylen Green. And so I think he fits really well. And I mean, you mentioned some of his numbers there from last year, Boise State. He can run, he can throw. 44 touchdowns in 28 games at Boise State. That's really a note that stood out to me about Taylen Green. Dual threat guy. And, I think his numbers are going to go way up working with Petrino. He's never been under an offensive coordinator who has the offensive mind and kind of the scheme as Bobby Petrino does. So I think Taylen Green is the guy. If you lose KJ Jefferson, which they did, you want to turn to a guy who will fit the program. And I think Taylen Green is that guy. So if you had to move on from KJ Jefferson, which they were forced to do, I think Taylen Green's a good guy to step up in there and lead this team.
Let's talk about the skill positions. Obviously, huge departure of Rocket Sanders going to South Carolina. Rashod Dubinion, another guy who's been there a while, but wasn't super productive a year ago, averaged 3.2 yards per carry. So they bring in Jaquindon Jackson, who ran for almost 800 yards and nearly 5 yards a carry at Utah last year. A receiver trio with a lot of guys who are returning, Andrew Armstrong, Isaac TeSlaa, guys like that, or TeSlaa, I think it is. But, a lot of same dudes that were there last year. And then Luke Hasz, the tight end who last year in 5 games caught 253 yards of the passes, is a kid who's, you would think, be more poised to help them this year now that he's healthy. What do we make of the skill position group here?
Yeah, I want to start with receivers because, like you mentioned, that's where a lot of guys returning are. And I think that's really good for Taylen Green to have a core group of receivers that he can go to, that he can rely on. And you mentioned Andrew Armstrong. I think that's a name to remember. Veteran guy. I think he'll get a lot of touches this year when it comes to it comes to the Razorbacks. He had 764 yards, 5 touchdowns last season. Tyrone Borden, 15 receptions, 109 yards, 3 touchdowns last year. So you got some guys coming back, which I think is big in the receiver room. It's deep, and I think that's good for Arkansas. I think that's good for Taylen Green to have a deep wide receiver room. The running back room's concerning, I think. The fact that they, of course, we mentioned lost Rocket Sanders. He's at South Carolina now. They lost really their top 3 backs that ran the ball, and that's a problem. And so I know they've got Rashod Dubinion back, and like we mentioned, Jaquindon Jackson coming in from Utah, but the lack of depth in that room at that position, I think, is cause for concern for Arkansas. Now, I think Taylen Green, and not to put everything on Green, but I think he'll run the ball quite a bit and can make up maybe for a little depth that's lacking in the running back room. But I like where they're at with receivers. Running backs, though, is another story, and I think that's something they're going to have to work on providing some depth at and seeing if they can get some positivity going there running the football. But I think Taylen Green, if he can kind of establish the run game to go along with throwing the ball and putting them in the hands of all these receivers, I think that could help the offense. But yeah, the running back room is definitely a concern to me.
Yeah, a few things stand out here. And by the way, they added a transfer from South Florida. I think it's Braun is how you pronounce it, who had 337 yards last year. May have botched the first name there. I apologize if I did. But some size there. They've got Tyrone Borden, who's 6'7", who may be the starter at the X, depending on who you listen to. Armstrong is 6'4", $199. He had 764 yards last year. Kind of went unnoticed as they had a difficult year, and Arkansas was not at the tip of anybody's tongue, but those are pretty good numbers. TeSlaa is 6'4", Jaedon Wilson 6'3", so interesting to see if they get some jump ball spots. Maybe if they can do something there with the size in the room. And at the running back spot, too, Dubinion 5'10", $199. Jackson 6'2", 235. So then maybe they can mix and match with styles a bit there too.
Yeah, and I will say this about the receiver room. I think this may be the strongest position on the field for Arkansas this year. Just they have the whole unit back from last year, their receivers. So I think that could be a really strong unit for Arkansas. I mean, if Taylen Green can live up to the hype, if he can put the ball up and these guys be able to make plays, we're going to be talking about Arkansas putting some points up because I think the room is so deep. And so I will say, I mean, this is a talented, good group of receivers, and I think it'll be the strongest group on the field because they are big. They're playmakers, and I think that will go a long way. And even if you mentioned Luke Hasz, he's coming back from a injury last year in that tight end position, so I think that's going to be crucial to having him back and having that tight end position where they can utilize it and be good. So I think that's going to be crucial also for Arkansas.
Yeah, offensive line under Sam Pittman and just traditionally at Arkansas, they've had some big dudes. I mean, when you think of Arkansas football, you think a lot of times of running the ball and just huge dudes that they can line up behind and just mash you. I mean, they're the Hogs for a reason, right? And they really hit the transfer portal hard. Fernando Carmona, who I guess will be their new left tackle, 6'5", 324, out of San Jose State, where he started a dozen games a year ago. Addison Nichols, the center transfer from Tennessee, where he was a reserve. They got Joe Moore, who will be a backup from Syracuse, I think, at one of the guard spots. Keyshawn Blackstock, I think, a Georgia native, who was a highly regarded kid out of JUCO a couple of years ago, manning right tackle ostensibly. And then, of course, the big guys in the middle, Braun and Kutas, at the guard positions, guys that have played a lot of ball. How are we feeling about the offensive line? I know Arkansas lost some good ones there, but did hit the portal hard.
Yeah, and Sam Pittman is the offensive line guy. I mean, that's the position that he coached before he became the head coach at Arkansas. So you kind of expect on a Sam Pittman team that they're going to have a really good offensive line. Now, it hasn't been great in his time there, but I think he's working to get that. They see the need for a really good offensive line because they see the receivers they have, And in order to get the ball to that deep receiver room, they got to have a quarterback that can get it there, and they got to have a quarterback that has time to get it there, and that's based off the offensive line. And so I think what they've put together with this offensive line this year, I think is going to be much better than what we've seen under any Sam Pittman coach team. I mean, you mentioned the returners, Josh Braun and Patrick Kutas. They're back. They've got the guys around him that you mentioned that have been brought in. And so I think and I think depth is going to be key. Like, are they going to have the depth to sustain a good offensive line? I think that'll be a question. But the starters, the guys who we project will be starting there on the offensive line, I think is a big step up under Sam Pittman. And it's got to be. I mean, if they want to win games, if they want to be successful this year, I think a lot of it is based off the offensive line and what they've put together so far. I like it. I like the direction he was looking. There's some big guys he's got up there, and some guys who've played games, have played. You mentioned that Carmona 12 starts, Kutas 13. You go down the list and you see these guys have played. They've been in ball games before, and I think that's definitely going to help. You're not just throwing young guys in there to have bodies. No, these are guys who've played meaningful snaps on the line, and I think that that could go a long way for Arkansas.
Yeah, I think Carmona earned some all Mountain West honors while he was at San Jose State. Here's an interesting thing. Their tackles, they're both 6'5", which is not unusual, but this team goes 6'5", 6'5", and 6'6" from left guard to right guard. It's not often that you see that height on your interior guys on the offensive line. Now, you can get away with it because your quarterback's 6'6", but that's a dynamic that you're not going to see a lot.
It is, and I think that's also what could make this group stand out and special, just the height that they have. But yeah, these are some big guys that I think, and they've got to be. You're playing in the SEC. You're playing a tough schedule, as we've talked about before on this channel, and so I think you've got to have battle-tested guys. You've got to have big guys, and so I think what the improvements they've made to the offensive line, I think will definitely. Are definitely key for success this year for Arkansas.
Yeah, never would have in a million years guessed a year ago when we were doing this that they were going to average 3.5 yards a carry. That just would have seemed like I remember thinking Sanders is going to be a Heisman finalist.
Yeah,
in New York. Of course, that didn't happen because of injuries and stuff. But just what a bizarre year it was for them a year ago. And I think, like you said, feels like they should just get better by default with what they did in the portal and the experience returning, especially inside. But let's talk the defense, which has been a disappointment for a couple of years. And, look, sometimes those numbers look worse when you play the schedule these guys do. But the front seven, you've got some experience there with Landon Jackson, Eric Gregory, Cam Ball, all returning on the defensive line. At linebacker, you got guys that are new to Arkansas in a lot of cases, but guys that have played a lot of ball other places. Headliner, of course, Landon Jackson, had a chance to spend some time across from him in media days this time a year ago. Just a 6'7", 280-ish pound guy who was chiseled, really mature. Remember him talking about, I think he was going to get married. I think it was last off season. Guy that's been super productive, 13.5 stops for loss. Having a lot of guys on that front seven that have played, again, not necessarily at Arkansas, but I think that's going to be an asset for Sam Pittman this year.
I think this is the most experienced defense that he's had in his 3 years at Arkansas. Like you mentioned, they may not have been all at Arkansas, but they've played a lot of snaps. They're experienced, and I think that's going to definitely help this defense. I mean, you look back, especially along that defensive line. I mean, there's a ton of guys who've played really meaningful games, and so I anytime you've played a lot of football, especially on a defensive line, on the defensive front, like you're battle tested, you're ready, you know what's on the other side, and the SEC is going to have some really powerful offenses, which means they're going to have some really good offensive lines, and so the teams that Arkansas is going to be faced against this year, this defensive line is going to have to hold up pretty well, and so. I think the defensive front, very experienced, but then you look behind that and, you look at the linebacker position specifically and, you got to think, well, hey, you may need to find some more depth here. You may need to work to get some depth. And Defensive back, good numbers, some good size back there as well. So I think overall, the defense has good size. There's some holes in some different positions, but I really like what they've done up front, and just the amount of reps that these guys have, I think will certainly help them.
Yeah, they've got Cam Ball, who's a junior in the middle. Eric Gregory at the nose is a senior. Jackson's a senior. And then here's a guy that's kind of intriguing. The kid they got from Albany, Antoine Yunkai, I think is how you pronounce it. I could be wrong about that, but it's Juncag, excuse me. 15 games, 15 starts, 55 tackles, 15 stops for loss, 6.5 sacks. So very productive at the FCS level a year ago. And then at linebacker on the weak side, Xavier Sori, who started some games for Georgia last year. They got Steven Dix, who was very productive at Marshall and had played some at Florida State before that. And then some guys like Brad Spence, who's been there, been pretty productive at Arkansas in some time. So a lot of guys up front. You see a lot of juniors and seniors on there, and guys that have played ball at Arkansas at different stops. All right, secondary has been a question mark for the Razorbacks the last couple of years. There have been some ugly raw numbers against the pass, although when you do this per snap, they weren't quite as bad. But a secondary that reloaded, again, through the portal. You got Marquise Robinson, who had 3 picks at South Alabama a year ago. Danico Slaughter, who plays that hog spot, which I guess is either a nickel or kind of a hybrid safety / linebacker. And that probably depends on who they've got in that spot, because they got some different body types. They got Hudson Clark, who's been there a long time, been really productive. This unit, I think, not short on experience, Chase.
Yeah, and I think that's that's really good. That they do have some experience, and Travis Williams, defensive coordinator there at Arkansas, that's kind of his area of expertise, and so I know his scheming wise, when he has guys who've played meaningful games, who have been in a lot of action, I think that's going to help him in his scheming of what they can and can't do. So maybe we'll see some different things from the Arkansas defense this year, just with guys who, again, who've played games. They're not throwing guys out there who, this is their first year and having to figure it out on the fly. No, these guys are battle tested. There's experience, and I certainly think you'll see that when you watch the Arkansas defense play on Saturdays this fall.
Yeah, one thing that stands out is experience. We've talked about Robinson and Slaughter having a lot of experience previously. Robinson, again, a marquee corner at South Alabama. You've got Jaden Johnson returning at strong safety, started or played 12 games a year ago. Miguel Mitchell had played some at Florida, played 11 games a year ago. They got a guy named Anthony Switzer who'll be the backup at that hog spot to Slaughter. No pun intended. 12 games, 11 starts at Utah State, 8 stops for loss, 4 pass breakups, a pick, a fumble recovery. So very, very productive guys. A lot of TJ Metcalf played a dozen games a year ago. They got a lot of guys that played a lot of ball, which is going to come in handy when you come up against the tempo and the talent that you see from the quarterback position against some of these offenses they'll see in the league this year.
Yeah, for sure, and that's huge. And I think as far as these guys that you've been mentioning in the corner position, I think this could be one of the best group of corners that Arkansas has seen in a while. One, based off experience, but 2, just talent. These are really talented guys, and I think that's really good because of that reason you just mentioned. I think this is the year of the quarterbacks in the SEC, and I think it's going to be a year of throwing the ball all over the yard. And so I think Arkansas's defense with these guys at corner, I think will enhance this team. And I mean, the defense, there's no doubt about it. The defense last year for Arkansas kept them in a lot of games. And I think that could be the case again this year. Yeah, there's some questions on the offense, like we talked about earlier. But I like some of these guys on the defense, and I think they can definitely keep the Hogs in some of these games, especially there at that corner position.
Anything on special teams stand out? I know they've got a kicker who's back for the umpteenth year, Matthew Shipley, who's done double duty. They've got a transfer in Devin Bale, who punted 41 yards a kick in high altitude at North Colorado. But Shipley's been pretty accurate, 14 of 18 on field goals, 30 of 31 on points after a year ago. Again, can step in and do double duty if your punter gets hurt. But anything of special teams that stands out to you with the Hogs?
They've also got Vito Calvucero.
Calvaruso, I think it is.
Yes. Sorry if I mispronounced that, but he transferred out. He's transferred back to Arkansas as a place kicker, and so I think they they're in a position where they've got some good specialists, and they had several really close games last year, 4 1-loss scores, and so I think to have good special teams, if you're going to be in close games like that, is very important. So I think they're good right now where special teams, and I think when you look up and down the roster, this should be a interesting year for sure for the Razorbacks.
Correction. I think I said Shipley been there a while. He's been a veteran, is what I meant to say. He transferred from Hawaii, where again you kicking some altitude, I think there too, but you also kicking some heat and some humidity, which they'll get plenty of in the SEC. But any parting thoughts here on the Hogs, Chase?
I think you're at the point with Arkansas, especially based off of last year. I mean, you look back, 9-4 in 2021, 7-6 in 2022, and then 4-8 last year. You kind of took 2 steps back from that 21 season. 23 and 25 under Sam Pittman. I think this is a year they need to make a bowl game. And just from the people I've talked to about the Arkansas program, just basically where are they at? What will it take for Sam Pittman to be back at Arkansas? And I think making a bowl game will go a long way. Now, you look up and down their schedule, and again, we've done a schedule preview on Arkansas. You can check out on our channel as well. But they got road games at Oklahoma State, at Auburn, at Mississippi State, at Missouri. They have at home. They've got, of course, A&M in Arlington. We got Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss, Texas, all coming into Fayetteville. I mean, it's a tough schedule for Arkansas. But I think, this is a team, and you see this a lot, Chris, that if a team especially is fighting for their coach, they're playing with a little chip on their shoulder, it could turn into a different year for the better if they play that way. So there's a lot of questions about Arkansas, but I think if you look up and down and you look at the players we talked about, the positions we spotlighted, I think this, Chris, could be a team that may surprise some people, that may win some games. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be top 5 in the conference, but you look up and down, and maybe this team can put it together, can utilize this deep wide receiver room, the corners, the veteran defensive line goes to work and gets it done. But and also I think back to all those 1-score losses last year. I mean, lost to BYU 38-31, lost at LSU 34-31, lost at Ole Miss 27-20, lost at Alabama 24-21, lost to Mississippi State 7-3. Those were against some really good teams.
Yeah.
And they were 1-score losses. So you kind of feel like Arkansas was right there in so many games last year. Now, what's it going to take? Can they get over that hump? Can they win some of those games with, I think, an upgraded roster from last year? Now, again, a lot, you lost KJ Jefferson, you lost Rocket Sanders, but those guys battled injuries last year and were out some anyway. So, it's a new roster. Maybe sometimes that's good, but I think, can they get over the hump? Can they win some of those games? Can they get into a bowl game? I think that's a big question for me when it comes to Arkansas.
Yeah, and another thing that stands out, I put together kind of a too deep depth chart, and that allows for, like, I'll put a third quarterback on there because you never know if you can see that guy, some extra defensive lineman, maybe an extra deep defensive back or two. But what stands out to me, they got 13 transfers. In terms of transfers, they got more than that, but guys that played somewhere else last year, I think 14 actually, now that I counted again. I don't know if that's a lot this day and age of college football, but again, you look across some of these places, they've got an experienced receiver room. They got a lot of experience on the defensive line. I'll be interested to see in the schedule. It's not easy, as you pointed out, but 2 of their first 3 are very winnable with Oklahoma State thrown in. And unfortunately for Arkansas, that's a road trip. Be interested to see how the Hogs really gel in those first 3 games.
I think that's going to be very important to see. You got Pine Bluff at Oklahoma State and UAB before conference play starts. So yeah, I think that'll be really important to see how they gel. But yeah, all the transfers. You look at the different coaches' perspective on the transfer portal. Some go, hey, let's get 6 guys who are really good, quality over quantity. But some teams, and I think Arkansas was in this position this year, they've just got to get quantity of guys. They're replacing a lot. And there's a ton of guys in the portal, ton of guys who've played, who have experience. And I think for a team like Arkansas, that's good to just go out and get a large quantity of guys that you think are going to fit well into your program and bring them in and make it happen. I mean, you got Sam Pittman, who is a great offensive line coach. Bobby Petrino, a great offensive mind who has head coaching experience. He's leading the offense now. Travis Williams, big players guy. Players love playing under him as defensive coordinator. So, I mean, you've got the staff to develop these players. And so I think that was good for them to just go out and bring as many guys as you can in to fill these holes and see what happens, see where it goes. I like it.
Yes, Sam Pittman has surprised us before. No reason he can't surprise us again. That's our preview of the Arkansas Razorbacks. Again, we are doing this in about mid-July, right as media days are going down, so some things could change here and there, but that's the best we got at the moment. We will be covering the Hogs and every other SEC football team throughout the season. Best way to get that, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. That helps our analytics, and we got a once-a-week football show. May not always talk about the Hogs, but we talk about every SEC team. So if you're looking for just a landing spot to keep up to date on the SEC, that's why we're here, to educate you about anybody and everybody in the league, and also looking for sponsors. So if you're interested in that, reach out to us. We've got an audience in the millions every year. All right, I'm Chris Lee. He's Chase Robinson. You've been watching Southeastern 16, presented by Bet Online.